Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Karibuni sana. Welcome to this event, which is going to be looking at the launch of the findings on a study on media coverage on DPI in Eastern Africa. So we are really happy to have all of you. This meeting is convened by CPESA and we're happy to have all of you present. So that we're able to start, I'd like us just to do a very quick round of introduction just to see who is in the room. So just say your name and your organization. And if you're not, say your country. So maybe from the back, very, very quickly, per table. In any order, yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Irene Kiragu from Katiba Institute, Kenya.
Good morning, everyone here. I'm Telesfor Kaberuka or Teleska. I'm a journalist from Rwanda.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mukanyarwanda Marie Louise. I'm a journalist from Rwanda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Naima Arwa Abdullah. I'm a journalist from Somalia.
Good morning. K. Emmanuel Dokoyona is my name. I'm a journalist from South Sudan.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning. My name is John Semakula. I come from Uganda Christian University.
Good morning. My name is Benon Oluka. I work with the Global Investigative Journalism Network. I'm based in Kampala, Uganda. Thank you.
Good morning. Peter Okello, Jabweri, Media Council of Uganda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eugene Ameli. I represent an organization called Akabe Productions from Kenya. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Silas Nyamwea. I work with Standard Media Kenya.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nancy Agutu. I work with Radio Africa Group in Kenya.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Agnes Mwangangi. I work with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Katsime. I work with the Independent in Uganda.
Okay, next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hassan Osman. I am from Somalia.
Habari za asubuhi. My name is Imani Henrik. I'm a journalist from Tanzania.
Ivan Lukanda from Makerere University, Uganda.
My name is Peter Elias from Mwananchi Communications Limited, Tanzania.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Gila from The Guardian, Tanzania.
Good morning, everyone. John Okande from UNESCO.
Good morning, everyone. James Wamadhai, Bloggers Association of Kenya.
Good morning, Raylene Kambua from the International Association of Women in Radio and TV, Kenya. Thank you.
My name is David Indeja. I work with KICTANET, Kenya ICT Action Network.
Bonjour à tous, Nadine Kampire de la République démocratique du Congo. Je travaille avec Afiamani Grand Lac.
Good morning, everyone. I am Samuel Abata from Ethiopia. I am a journalist.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ronald Musoke. I'm a journalist from Uganda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jean Dodin Kumasabo. I'm a journalist from Burundi.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Badru Mulumba. I'm here as a researcher currently based in South Sudan. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jean-Pierre Afadar. I'm a journalist based in Kenya. I work with Pan-African Visions. I'm also a research consultant. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jan Ajwang and I come from Media Focus on Africa in Uganda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lincoln Jogu. I come from Innovation for Policy Foundation, Rwanda.
Morning, everyone. Wakab is my name, and I work with CPESA.
Good morning. My name is Zena. I work with the Nubian Rights Forum.
Good morning. My name is Annette Opio with Nubian Rights Forum.
Good morning, friends. My name is Chachi Lotino from the Eastern Africa Editor Society.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Karanja from Co-Develop.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mustafa Mahmoud. I work with Namati.
Good morning. My name is Desire Kachenje. I'm from Tanzania and I work with Co-Develop.
Good morning. My name is Peter Mwesige. I work with CPESA and I invited you here.
Right. Is there anybody you've not heard? Just introduce yourself.
Bruce Ogutu, technician.
The rest. Take the mic, please.
Morning, everybody. My name is James Omai, cameraman.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Gitao, photographer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Willis Ochol. I'm the translation and technician.
Ladies at the back.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Doreen Namianja. I work with CPESA.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, je suis Oscar, interprète.
Good morning, my name is Benson. I'm in the...
Thank you. This now we know everybody. My name is Victor Capio. I'll be your moderator for today. And I'd like, without much further ado, to go straight into the program. But perhaps before that, as you're all aware, I think yesterday Kenya faced a very difficult moment with the passing of former Prime Minister, Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. So I'd like us to be on our feet and give a moment of silence. Thank you. Right. So to start off this meeting, we have our session for opening remarks. I'd like to invite Dr. Weragala Wakabi from ED of CPESA to make his opening remarks. Wakabi.
Good morning again. It's my pleasure to welcome everybody to launch of research results on how the media report on issues of DPI in East Africa. This work is very important to the work that CPESA does, and I believe to the work that many of the entities here do. For those that may not know, the mission of CPESA is to promote inclusive and effective use of ICT for improved governance and livelihoods. My colleagues will explain in detail what DPIs are. For my part, I can state categorically that DPIs have become increasingly a lifeblood of the digital society and indeed an engine for digital economies. A lot of the work that one of us does around inclusion, around privacy, around increased efficiency by public services delivery has a large element that has to do with DPIs. It is therefore our collective responsibility to ensure that DPIs deliver for everyone, excluding nobody, and being transparent in the ways that they operate. This project is very much aligned, therefore, with the CPESA's commitment to promote and protect digital rights and the digital economy, as well as create inclusive societies in Africa. Besides the research findings that will be launched here today, there are bigger components of the work that SPESA is working on around DPIs with a partnership with the co-develop. One component of it is the DPI Journalism Fellowship for Eastern Africa, under which we have those that we are working with on the journey of creating more meaningful and impactful reporting on DPIs, reporting that we hope can contribute to policies and practices that ensure that digital public infrastructure serves all citizens equitably while remaining rights respecting. We have been with those fellows here in Nairobi, I think from Sunday, conducting training, both skills and knowledge around DPIs and improve reporting in this area. We look forward to seeing the results of that, and in the subsequent conversations that we shall have here, that results, I think we'll be able to see how those program can contribute to improving DPI reporting that informs policies and practices that are progressive, that are rights respecting, that are inclusive. I thank very much our partners co-develop that enable this work to go ahead, and we are glad that they're here. We'll hear from them, but we can only give them a small clap. And for being here, we all look forward to a very fruitful conversation. Thank you.
A better round of applause. Thank you, Dr. Wakabi. Next to make his remarks is Mr. Robert Karanja from Co-Develop. Robert, karibu. Oh, you have some slides.
Good morning, everyone. I saw everybody introduce themselves, except a very dear friend of mine who's seated at the back. So if you could please hand over the mic to Diana. I would like for her to introduce herself, please. Diana, karibu.
Thank you, Robert, for calling me. I snuck in because I was late, but Many Mulika. My name is Diana Sang. I work with the Digital Impact Alliance. I've worked closely with Co-Develop, good friends with CIPESA, and really happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Even though you snuck in, I saw you from a distance, so you had no chance but to introduce yourself. Yeah. As our moderator mentioned today is a difficult day in this country. We are mourning the loss of a very important person, a man who is a hero and who has done a lot for this nation. So we pray that the soul of Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga will rest in eternal peace. CIPESA had asked me to speak a bit about why we as Co-Develop partnered with them on this work, and also to speak a bit about DPI what it is and what it is not. So I've put a website up on the screen. Please feel free to take that link because there's a lot of important information that can be found on that link, which is the Center for Digital Public Infrastructure wiki. But just to maybe give a bit of a background on why the narrative or an African narrative for digital public infrastructure is important. It's very simple because I think as much as DPI has become a more commonly discussed term throughout the world and throughout the continent, until 2 years ago, the narrative for most of what was happening on this continent was being written by people who are not in the continent. So it was very common to read about Ethiopia's digital ID in global magazines or newspapers or also online platforms. But hardly any of those stories were being written by Africans themselves. And there's a common saying that goes that until the lion learns to write his or her own stories, the stories will always glorify who? The hunter. So that's why 2 years ago in 2023, we decided to experiment with an organization called the Media Foundation for West Africa that's based in Accra, Ghana, and that works throughout West Africa, to start DPI Media Fellowship in 10 countries, some of which were Anglophone, others were Francophone, and the others were Lusophone, Portuguese speaking. And based on the success of that initial DPI fellowship, we then expanded our work in West Africa to reduce the number of countries. So 2 Anglophone countries, Nigeria and Ghana, and 2 Francophone countries, Benin and Togo, but more of a deep dive to get stories that are being written by journalists from those countries on digital public infrastructure that is happening in their countries. That work also informed the work that we're now doing in East Africa with CPESA, which is essentially to work across 9 or 10 East African countries. We've heard of participation of journalists from Tanzania, Kenya, Burundi, Somalia, and many other countries in the region, to equip these journalists with not only the knowledge, the skills, and the information to be able to adequately write about digital public infrastructure in their countries. DPI is a long-term, and the definition that I put up on the screen is perhaps one of the more globally accepted terms. But essentially, digital public infrastructure is solutions that look at addressing socioeconomic problems at population scale. So this could include issues such as identity. It could also include payments, instant and inclusive payment systems, and also a data exchange. How does the public sector and the private sector exchange data, particularly on citizens and residents, to be able to provide services to the people? And so it looks at a combination of technology standards together with governance. Governance is important to encourage private innovation to address societal problems at scale. And so you can see some of the examples there: financial inclusion, affordable healthcare, quality education, climate change, and others. If you look at the second bullet or the second point, it also talks about some real-world examples. And this is where I want to challenge you as journalists and who are writing stories. Is there a single African example that has been put up there? Somewhere. Ethiopia is running a very innovative digital ID. In fact, by the time Ethiopia rolls out its digital ID, it should be the largest on the continent, maybe second after Nigeria. 130 million people, right? Why is it not there? And you showed me your digital ID, I saw it. How many fields is Ethiopia collecting for digital ID? 4 or 5? Name? Yeah. Name, birthplace? Maybe just take the mic and just share.
Name, birth date, address where he live.
You forgot.
Let me read. I already have it.
Yeah. Just check your digital ID because I know you have it in your wallet. It's called FIDA.
Yeah, we call it FIDA. Name, gender, birth date, and the address, phone number. And it has a QR code
at the back here.
Yeah. And picture.
And your picture. So those are what? 6 fields? That's the only information you need in Ethiopia's context to be able to adequately identify somebody. At one point, when some of our countries were experimenting with digital ID, they wanted to collect 100 and what? 120 fields, including your blood group. What does blood group have to do with identifying who you are? Because a digital ID or an ID basically says you are who you say you are. It's period. There's an important thing that they removed in the Ethiopia FIDA, Samuel. You and I discussed it, right? Which is? No, there's that piece of information that they decided not to include. Ethnicity. Why do you need ethnicity on digital ID? Unless the identity is being used for other motives, right? You don't need it. Because as long as he told me he's Samuel, then I should believe he is who he says he is, because that card is also biometrically verified. Right? So I'm just giving an example of what Ethiopia is doing. How many Kenyan journalists do we have in the room? Including bloggers, 1, 2, 3, almost 10. You're all sitting in the same corner. What is happening to your digital ID? I say this one I have on my right hand is my digital ID. At least it's the closest. What is happening with Kenya's digital ID? If anyone can please respond. Where are we? Do we have one? What is it called? Yeshua. I had Huduma, I had Maisha. And do you have your Maisha card with you? You do? Yeah. You get a Maisha card, eh? How many fields are they collecting? Yeah. But again, the reason I'm bringing up these examples, Uganda is also working on a digital ID. And for your information, Uganda's digital ID platform and Ethiopia's digital ID platform are running on the same system, which is called MOSIP, M-O-S-I-P, an open source ID platform. So the source code for that ID platform is sitting with both the NIRA in Uganda and NIDP in Ethiopia, the ID authorities, which means they can change and customize that ID system all the way to the source code, which is important because now control sits with us rather than with a vendor, right? So hopefully in the next few months, this cohort should be able to add those stories to item number 2 so that we stop reading about India, we stop reading about Estonia, and we stop reading about PICS. So that's a general overview of what DPI is. I also wanted to perhaps just share, we've also heard about digital public goods. So MOSIP, for example, which is the open source ID platform that both Uganda and Ethiopia are using, Kenya has considered it, but we are not yet there, is an open source ID platform, which is actually a digital public good. And those definitions at the top give us what the description of a DPG is. So it's open source software, open standards, open data, anything that provides you with the full source code is considered a digital public good, because it's not vendor locked and anybody has access to it for free. When you combine a set of well-designed assets or resources, open source software, data, content that are freely available, you can then use those to build digital public infrastructure. So a collection of digital public goods enable you to then build what we call digital public infrastructure. If any of you are in Nairobi next week, what are the dates for Moja Loop? 21st to 23rd? October 21st to the 23rd next week. Moja Loop, MOJALOOP, is having a community event in Nairobi. And Moja Loop is also a digital public good, which is an open source, instant and inclusive payments system. So you can check, I think you can register virtually to attend Moja Loop, MOJALOOP, and that can also give you additional information on what an open source, instant and inclusive payment system looks like and what it does. My colleague Desire was formerly with Moja Loop before she joined us. So if you have any specific questions on Moja Loop, she can respond. Yeah. I don't want to take too much time so that we can continue, but I do want to leave you with a challenging question. Given the definition that we've provided on what DPI is and what a DPG is, and DPG is in the context of digital public infrastructure, I know this is a question you may have discussed over the last few days, but I'm curious if, as journalists, you can investigate further and find out, is, for the Kenyans who are in the room, is M-Pesa digital public infrastructure? Depending on which country you're in, you may be using MTN Momo and other mobile systems, mobile payment systems. Are they digital public infrastructure? And what qualifies them to be or not to be DPI? I'll give you my controversial answer. I think M-Pesa should be considered digital public infrastructure. Why, you're asking, right? Remember we talked about financial inclusion. Before M-Pesa, what was the financial inclusion in Kenya? I think 20, 23, 25%. And today, Kenya's financial inclusion is roughly 90%. Whereas M-Pesa may be privately owned with some public ownership, depending on how you look at it. Is it not the primary way in which we send money across this country? And also even government payments, G2P payments, go through M-Pesa. And I know as journalists, you would also know that over the next, I think it may happen, over the next few months, there will be some divestiture. Is that the right word? Divestiture, right? From where? From Safaricom PLC. So if that happens, then there will be less. I think GOK wants to own less of some of these resources and let them float freely. Yeah. But please look further into M-Pesa or whichever is the dominant mobile money system in your countries, and come back to Peter and let him know whether it's DPI and justify it, and then we can review that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. We were expecting someone from the Communication Authority, but I don't know if they've arrived. No? Okay. So we'll proceed with the next session, which is the presentation of the findings. Sorry? All right, so we'll... So because of time, yes. So, Dr. please, karibu for your presentation. Dr. Mwesije is a very well-known media practitioner, having worked in the sector for many years within East Africa and beyond. He's an expert on media issues and has conducted a lot of research and also trained many journalists on these very interesting issues and has been leading on this work. So, Doctor, if you're ready, please proceed.
Yeah. You let me know. You just wink at me or something. Good morning once again. I'm happy to be here. I was telling some friends for the Kenyans in the room. I used to move not so very far from here some years ago. Exactly, was it 16 years ago? It's a pity I came to Kenya at the beginning of post-election violence of 2007 to work with National Media Group as a training editor. And now I come back and one of the protagonists is dead. So I don't know if there's anything about me and this country, but I join you in mourning Raila Amolo Odinga. He was a big figure in our liberation movements on this continent, in this region, the controversies notwithstanding. Okay, you see. So, as Dr. Wakabe mentioned, this study that whose findings we are launching today is part of our DPI journalism fellowship for Eastern Africa, and we did it partly to establish a baseline on how the media are covering these issues of DPI and DPGs. I don't know who did this. Now, this little thing going up and down is, I tried stopping it, but please excuse me. It's quite annoying, but let me see if I can press it and arrest it somewhere. Well, no, you see, there's a problem. So, okay, I'll just leave it. Yeah, so we try to establish a baseline so that next year we can find out if our fellows, many of whom are in the room here, are making a difference in terms of increasing the quantity and the quality of reporting on DPI. That's one. And the other one was to inform the design of the curriculum that we have used to train them. We sort of try to take a quick look at what was happening out there, where are gaps, where are the strong areas, so we can then use that to come up with training modules that can strengthen their reporting. The other one was for it to serve beyond the fellowship as a learning resource for journalists, and academics, media trainers across the region. That's why we have invited deliberately a number of media support people and academic colleagues to this meeting. And then finally, we were hoping that our monitoring tool, which is quite comprehensive, can guide similar work elsewhere, including in West Africa. We were inspired, as Robert Karanja has said, by our colleagues at the Media Foundation for West Africa to come up with this fellowship. But we have done this and they haven't done it. We're hoping we can encourage them to also, undertake these kinds of work so we can compare results across, over time, see what's happening in our region when it comes to media coverage of DPI. So our objectives were to assess the volume, distribution, and prominence of media coverage of DPI across selected media outlets in the 7 countries that we covered. We covered 9 countries initially, but as is sometimes the case, 2 researchers haven't been able to complete their work in time for reasons beyond our control. So we are still waiting to see if they will be able to fulfill their commitments. We also wanted to analyze the thematic focus and, article types or story types, journalistic styles or formats, and the sourcing of stories on DPI and DPGs. And then we wanted to examine the institutional, the editorial, the contextual, and such factors that affect coverage, across the region. The research questions were pretty straightforward. What's the volume of stories on DPI, DPGs in this period? How are these stories placed? Are they on the front page? Are they on page 2? Are they very far that, you'd have to take 10 minutes also to get to them? how are they placed wherever they are? Are they on the first part of the page? Are they in the middle? Are they at the bottom? Those of you who are familiar with newspaper design know that sometimes those placements or that placement say something about the priority that editors give to a particular story. So we asked questions about that. We looked at the types of articles that were covered. Are they basic news stories? Are they news features? Are they profiles or Q&As, and so on and so forth? We looked at reporting formats or journalistic styles, which typically are three. One is the conventional hard news reporting. He said this, she said that, event-based, straight to the point, no analysis, nothing. The second one was enterprise and enterprise, where journalistic initiative comes in handy. And then the third one was investigation, where exposition is really at the heart. Then we looked at the themes, the dominant themes or topics in the coverage. He was asking what is DPI, what is not DPI. So we looked at things like national ID, digital ID, payment systems, data exchanges, and for DPGs, things like all these manner of portals, online portals for public services, and so on and so forth. We looked at sourcing, the original sources of stories, what prompts them. Are they press releases? Are they public events like ours here? Are they editor initiatives? Are they citizen submissions? And so on. We also looked at the institutions that were of focus in the stories. Yeah. And then, the human sources, the gender of those sources, and how many sources typically were included in all these stories. Okay. So in terms of methodology, I'll try and be very quick. We had a mixed methods approach, but we mainly relied on quantitative content analysis, where we actually counted stories, so this thing has this recorded. We used the standard coding sheet across the 9 countries. We used purposive sampling, which means we deliberately chose, said we are going to go for the newspapers in Kenya because they are widely circulating and, they have influence. We are going to go for these 2 online platforms because they are influential and so on. So that the list of the different, media platforms that we looked at is over there. One of the limitations we have with this is that because of access to archives, there was an inconsistency in 2 or 3 of the countries where, because the researchers could not get newspapers and 2 online platforms for 2024, they had to use online platforms for television or radio, something like that. Then the other one is, I think, an issue that Robert was trying to throw around, which is definitional challenges. Is M-Pesa a DPI or not? So no matter, even if we give very standard definitions across the board, standardized and all that, there was always bound to be debate amongst some of the country teams on whether the stories we were seeing were in fact DPI or not. Our own sense though is that notwithstanding, we are still able to discern patterns that are fairly consistent and that are telling, regardless of some of those limitations. So the volume of stories, you can see that Tanzania and Kenya have the highest number of stories in that period, whereas Rwanda and South Sudan are at the bottom rank. Ethiopia is in there in between, and so on. I think these two, Tanzania and Kenya, constitute nearly 60% of all the coverage. So the coverage was definitely varied across the region. One could say it's because of the differences in the media systems. Kenya is a far more developed, media market. Tanzania is also quite big when it comes to the diversity of media platforms and so on. But also the digital ecosystems in these countries, differ. I mean, Sudan is quite behind, just like DRC, quite behind when it comes to what is happening in the digital transformation landscape. In terms of topics, we first, asked ourselves, sort of try to distinguish between DPGs and DPI, and overwhelmingly, a lot of the coverage focused on DPI, with the exception of Kenya and DRC, whether you see nearly a third of the stories focusing on DPGs. And again, I suspect that is because these countries have a number of open source platforms that are being used, for service delivery. Rwanda is a bit intriguing because in the last few years, they have come up with so many, search portals. So we would have expected slightly higher numbers there than what we are seeing from these findings. Then when it comes to the subtopics, data exchange, data identification systems, digital payment, and so on, we noticed that media attention varied considerably across the region. But what stood out was digital identity systems across all these countries were among the biggest, topics. And then innovation and the economic impact of DPIs. The issues which we advocate a lot about, policy, governance, data privacy, equity and inclusion were not always included in the coverage. And therefore, the civil society guys in the room who are working on digital governance, digital transformation, I think your work is cut out. You need to pull up your socks in terms of influencing media coverage of these issues. What we are seeing from these numbers, and I'm sorry if you are intimidated by numbers, there was no way I could represent this very easily. But what we are seeing from these numbers is that the media tended to pay more attention to the functional side of the service delivery side of DPI, DPGs than to the rights and governance sides of these systems. The types of stories, news was dominant, and we shall understand why as we go along. News reports, basic news reports. We have very little, feature storytelling on DPIs, which is surprising because I think there's so many opportunities to do features on this subject. And with the exception of Ethiopia, where you have some bit of, Q&As, we have very little Q&As across the region and profiles again. So opportunities to tell stories, to use stories of innovators, for instance, as a window into the promise and limits of DPI are lost as a result of that. In terms of story placement, front page treatment of DPI stories was very rare. Most of the stories were very often in the inside pages. The blue represents stories beyond page 3. And as you can see, nearly 80%, 8 out of every 10 stories on DPI, DPGs were after page 3. For newspapers, the researchers were not able to do this for online platforms. It's a work in progress. Then in terms of placement on the page, a lot of the stories in the countries where this was measured at least had DPI in either the first in the top or the second to the top. So there was some degree of importance, I think, assigned by the editors to these stories based on where they were placing them across newspaper platforms in the 4 countries where this was measured. Then in terms of reporting formats, as I mentioned at the beginning, the conventional hard news format basically, just neutral event-centered approach, which looks at sport or hard news. The enterprise reporting one looks at a journalist initiative or an editor's initiative, to do stories beyond what has just happened. And then the investigative reporting one focuses on exposition or uncovering what others would want to be, hidden. That green color, those green charts show you that conventional hard news reporting dominated coverage across all the countries in the region. In almost these countries, 9 out of 10 stories were hard news. He said this, she said that, and they concluded. But we also note that Kenya and Tanzania recorded significantly higher levels of enterprise reporting. And again, this goes back to the earlier observation we made about these media systems. We seem to think that these are in fact related. We will come to the implications of that very quickly. Then when it comes to where these stories came from, the original source of the stories, across all these countries, official events were the dominant sources of stories. Again, if you look at the reporting format and this one, where a story coming from, they are connected. It's not surprising, therefore, that we are seeing event-based stories. We again consistently see that Tanzania and Kenya show higher proportions of stories based on enterprise. Because remember, they also did more enterprise stories, actually. So yeah, we will come to why this should be a cause for concern as we conclude. Then, in terms of newsmakers, basically, this variable looked at who made the news, who was the focus, as individuals, who was the focus of the coverage on DPI. And government officials, the usual suspects, nearly accounted for 55% of sources. Civil society experts, ordinary people were very often ignored. They were not covered as much. Business were the other big ones, the other usual suspects, as that red color shows you across that chart. So CSOs, maybe with the exception of South Sudan and Badru, may later on tell us why that's the case. It appears South Sudan is the one country, and of Kenya, where civil society has been given quite a bit of voice. Then when it comes to institutions, again, it's government institutions that take the lion's share of coverage. We have not put numbers in those charts because they were a bit too crowded. I mean, not very many charts, but if you want to know by numbers, just remember we have the 70 up there. So use that 70 to guide you. You can see that in most countries, we are talking about anywhere between 45 and above government, officials. Then when it comes to human sources, again, it is government officials. Who is quoted, even if, regardless of whether they are the newsmaker or not, who is quoted in the conversation about DPI coverage. Again, we see that government officials tend to, get more attention than any other sort of business or company reps. Again, ordinary citizens are not a big part of the conversation. Similarly, civil society is not a big part of the conversation. So what that shows is there's limited diversity in sourcing and potential knowledge gaps in journalist coverage across the region. The gender, this is something that remains a challenge across this region, not just in DPI reporting, I believe, but in public policy reporting. Generally, women are very often ignored as sources. 80% of sources across the board, almost 80% are men. You can see in Ethiopia, we have an extreme case of just about 5% of sources being female. Rwanda has some significant number, 28% is a little better than what other countries are doing. That doesn't come as much of a surprise if you remember that Rwanda is also well above, I think, many countries in the region when it comes to women in public service. So since public government officials are the dominant sources, and since Rwanda has very many women in public service, it goes without saying that their numbers would be a bit higher. Okay. Then the number of sources, this variable unfortunately wasn't captured by some of our researchers, at least as of by the time we compiled this set of the results they hadn't captured that variable. But those who captured it, basically in Uganda, in Kenya, in South Sudan, we see that although a good number of stories had 2 or more sources, a significant number of them actually had only one source. 27% in Uganda, 35% in Kenya, 37% in South Sudan. That's quite alarming when it comes to its implications on limiting the depth and plurality of perspectives. You can only gain so much value from single-sourced stories. And then, to their credit, the media across all these countries carried some good degree of background and context when it came to DPI coverage. My colleagues will share a little insights into examples of maybe some of these things here and there. But as you can see, for all the progress Tanzania has made on enterprise, it is a bit alarming that when it came to Tanzania, it is I think Ethiopia, where the number of stories without background was quite high, and Uganda too. The number of stories without background was quite high. 17% in Uganda, 20% in Ethiopia. So now, I'm just very quickly going to talk about what these tables mean, and we shall be sharing all of these with you once we have cleaned them up. We shall share the executive summary right after this presentation, and including the recommendations. But let's quickly talk about what these numbers seem to be saying. One, the regional patterns of media attention, as we have said, there is significant variation. We mentioned that Kenya and Tanzania produce nearly 60% of all the stories, and we have lower volumes in South Sudan and Rwanda, which kind of suggests that perhaps the uneven maturity and digital ecosystems, in the region create information gaps. So public awareness inevitably is going to be growing at different speeds in the region. In countries where there's more coverage, you would expect to find more public awareness than in countries where there is less coverage. In terms of thematic emphasis, we are seeing basically that the media are paying a lot more attention to the functional or service aspects of DPI than to the governance or rights aspects of DPI. And then basically what we are saying is whereas the media are reporting fairly, to their credit, digital transformation in terms of what's going on, they are not doing enough to report, who participates in these systems, how are these systems designed, how are they affecting rights, who is included, who is excluded. More questions need to be answered there. And then in terms of reporting depth, we are basically inundated by event-driven hard news that rarely asks questions or, interrogates public statements. Enterprise and investigation are still limited, although Kenya and Tanzania show some exceptions. Then in terms of sources, voices, and representation, the usual suspects, government, business, continue to dominate coverage. And civil society, citizens, experts are largely absent, and women are also largely absent from the conversation. Overall, that means perspectives, diversity of perspectives is quite limited. Finally, I'll talk about the institutional and structural determinants of coverage. We have talked about media capacity. We seem to also think that Kenya's civic tech partnerships are bearing fruit. Freer information flows in this country also mean, I think, more coverage that appears to shake the tree. DRC and South Sudan face resource constraints that show in terms of both the volume and the quality of reporting. There is, generally speaking, poor investment in journalism, especially investment in in-depth investigative reporting. And then finally, I'll talk about the implications of this for journalism policy and public policy. We cover DPI as journalists, yes, but we seldom interrogate its governance and rights dimensions. We definitely need training and mentorship to improve our approaches, I guess, to coverage of DPIs. We have talked about limited diversity, which constrains public scrutiny and citizen engagement on digital transformation. So this, in a sense, the story of digital transformation is at risk of becoming a story of the elite, a story of the governing elite, if we do not do something about media coverage. But like we have said, we have seen some promising cases in Kenya and in Tanzania. I will look at this. We have a set of recommendations for journalists, for media owners and editors, for government, donors, the private sector, civil society, and all that, which we'll share in the executive summary that we are going to be sharing with you shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Another round of applause for excellent presentation. I know there's likely going to be some questions, so the request is if you have any questions, just know. Then after the panel, Dr. will also come and respond to any questions about the research, right? Is that okay? All right. So without much further ado, I'd like to invite the panelists for the next session. So in no particular order of importance, we have the panel will basically be discussing the country perspectives from the study in terms of what unique aspects that emerged from all the countries. This broader research presents the overall picture, but we also want to hear what are some of those key elements that distinguish us as countries. So I'd like to invite Mr. Churchill Otieno, the researcher for Kenya. Churchill, you're here. Badru Mulumba, South Sudan. And then last but not least, Nadine Kampire from DRC. Karibuni. Nadine? Right. So I know we have limited time, but we'll try to make do and keep our responses brief so that we're able to share the key items that emerge from the studies. So first of all, thank you very much for all the good work that you've done. We've seen the compilation in terms of what has happened across, the countries and the trends. So the first question I'd like to ask all of you with this mic, start with Badru from the end. For South Sudan, what you say are the top three findings that either stood out or surprised you?
Thank you very much. The first one actually goes to which Dr. Peter just alluded to, the lack of archives. When I was running a newspaper there 10 years ago, we made certain, and this was a must, you had to keep 3 files of every copy of the newspaper. And now you go to every newsroom and they're not keeping copies, right? There is nothing. And then you try copy. So my first instinct was to think that maybe this is a bad thing. Like the media has actually regressed, right? But I thought about it on my way here, and I said, maybe it's actually the media is taking a leap, because then we're able to go online, right? They're taking a leap. They're moving way faster to the future, right? And disposing of, like letting go of all this paper-based record keeping. The same thing we see. It's kind of like it's a very unique country. I think there is a leap taking place. We see the same thing with Starlink came here and they didn't come to South Sudan, but a lot of the equipment was coming from here and going to Juba. So like right now, Juba is oversubscribed for residentials. You can't get an account to subscribe because we tried this last week. For the last 3 months, you cannot. It's full. So there is this kind of, there is actually a silent movement, a leapfrog, but you cannot sense it. And if you misinterpret the lack of hard records, you may actually end up making the wrong conclusion. And maybe the other one was more to do with what we found, and this was the absence of parliament. I think that was a sad thing because I expected that I would be seeing a lot of MPs talking, right? I was going to see a lot of parliamentarians speaking. I was going to see a lot of stories coming out of parliament. But then you kind of notice that everything that you read about in DPI is coming from the executive, is coming from the communication authority. And of course, the implication for the future means that whatever you do without going through parliament can easily be undone in future, right? The other one was the other surprise was the gender. I think we can look at 25% as too little, right? But for me, I was surprised. I thought that was a lot, by the way, based on my understanding of the situation and the challenges that women face coming forward. I thought 23% was huge, right, for the country, because a few years ago, you could have an entire newspaper and there is no female voice. And so there is that kind of, it was a surprise for me.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very interesting dynamic that you could actually read a newspaper and find no articles from women. So I'd come to you, Nadine, also the same. What top three elements either stood out for you or surprised you from DRC?
Ok, merci beaucoup. Je crois qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup de différences.
Just hold on for people to use the translation. Okay. Voilà.
Bon, je disais qu'il n'y a pas une forte différence avec le Soudan. Déjà que nous avons analysé 4 médias, 2 sont en ligne et sont aussi en presse écrite, entre autres le Potentiel et Radio Okapi qui est un média radio et aussi en ligne. Et malheureusement, l'archivage en presse papier était difficile à trouver, donc nous étions obligés de nous référer sur la publication en ligne. Il y a aussi une forte concentration sur l'innovation qui a été de 34%. Donc, les thématiques plus couvertes par le média en RDC étaient axées sur l'identité électronique et les paiements électroniques. Mais aussi, nous avons vu qu'il y a une faible couverture de questions critiques, entre autres la gouvernance, les questions critiques de gouvernance, entre autres la confidentialité et la sécurité, la politique, législation et gouvernance, mais aussi la participation des citoyens. Les journalistes s'est focalisé seulement sur le fait factuel de l'innovation et ont essayé d'oublier les questions importantes qui aident la population à se retrouver dans ces secteurs des pays. Voilà.
Thank you. So this was more now substantive issues around the quality of reporting. Churchill, turning over to you. You've worked in Kenya many years. What stood out for you? At least the top three. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. One thing that I think struck me was the reality that nearly all the stories were coming from official sources, or if you like, government sources. Being a digital journalist, I know that when it comes to ICTs, there's a huge private sector involvement and private sector driven activities. So it was fairly shocking that when you look at coverage in our newspapers, but also news websites, the voices that by far is contained there. In fact, I think out of the sources, only about 14% were from the private sector. Yeah, the huge majority tended to come from the public sector. So that for me was very bothering, especially because I also know that in Kenya we have a fairly active ICT community, both in terms of entities, but also in terms of professionals who are participating in that area. The second bit of it was the tendency that a large majority of these stories were done by the larger newsrooms. Yeah, that the newer newsrooms, the smaller newsrooms, hardly paid any attention to DPIs. Yeah, so it perhaps speaks to the thinning of newsrooms that we've seen in the recent past. But secondly, I think something that came out, became apparent, was the apparent technical gaps that exist within the newsrooms in terms of understanding and engaging with some of the issues that then are involved when it comes to DPIs. A certain sense seems to come to the surface that there's an attitude that DPI issues are complex and require a certain level of technical know-how to engage with. Perhaps it's an invitation for newsroom leaders, but also those leading the ecosystem to find out how then might we help enhance those capacities, given the centrality that DPIs now have taken in our lives. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting that you say that. I remember, and Mustafa, I remember even when we were doing the digital ID meetings with the Ministry of Interior, when the press came, they only focused on what the minister was saying and the PS. After the PS finished his address, all of them disappear. And you're like, hey, we are here. Communities, Nubians, we're here. But they've all disappeared after the press conference and they don't want to speak to. So it's something which, rightly, we have seen it in practice, and perhaps that also contributes to that, perspective that it is only government that has the news. And if it is not official until a government official says it, yet there are other sources of information that could also provide useful perspective. And, while you are still holding the mic, Churchill, yes, Kenya is also very, very advanced in its reporting in terms of the media industry. But there are still some challenges in terms of enterprise and, investigation. So are you able to highlight why is this so around DPI?
I think I've sort of alluded to it because one, there seems to be a certain, I don't know if you can call it an attitude or a perception that DPI issues are difficult, technical, complicated, hard to understand. And for that reason, where you find that, for instance, the newsrooms that had reasonably high coverage of these issues also tended to have specialist desks that sometimes are oriented to business generally or oriented to technology. And therefore, they had teams that consistently were looking into this space. Yeah, the ones that had very, very low incidence of these stories tended to rely on a general newsroom to also deal with this question. So sometimes you find that those issues then get lost in the mix and in the run of the mill. What perhaps might help is in maybe getting dedicated desks in the newsrooms to begin to focus on this, develop the necessary relationships with the news sources that are informative but not necessarily official, to then be able to bring those voices higher. The civil service, the civil society voice was completely lacking in most of those stories. The expert voice in terms of researchers or even academia was also lacking. Yet we know that there's a lot of content in those spaces, and that people are available locally whose voices could be elevated.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to you, Badru. The issues from South Sudan highlight, gaps in terms of diversity in sourcing. Why is this the case, and what can be done about it? Very briefly.
I think diversity in sourcing, this boils down to the lack of diversity. It boils down to one, low literacy levels. Two, who understands these issues? Of course, that's part of it. Who understands these issues, even when you're in government? So you find that it's only the specialized institutions, right? Like the National Communication Authority that talks about these things. A lot of things are not easy to understand. And so you find that mostly what the media is dealing with are these policy press releases or policy statements that are coming from the top. And maybe the journalists are also regurgitating the statements. So you find that that's a challenge, especially the literacy is lower for women. So that implies that, of course, is reflected in how they are covered. The other thing, maybe the difference that could be that I would have expected to see a lot of activists covered, because when you're out of the country, you think that there's a big ecosystem, right? Because they don't make a lot of noise online. But I feel like what Mr. Karanja said, the activists have been lucky that they have had their voices lifted internationally, right? But somehow on the ground, and I think this also goes to what we heard from Rwanda, somehow on the ground, why isn't the national media picking up those activists? So it may mean that actually maybe the activists are talking to a different audience, right? And the national media is talking to the issues of the people on the ground. So that makes you think that maybe there is a divergence. The activists are coming in with all these ideas, right? And nobody on the ground is picking them up. And I spoke to one who said that is not true. But of course it is true, because the research was saying that it was true, because they can make noise on TikTok, right? Yeah. On Facebook. And maybe, TikTok is not a big thing. On social media is not a big thing down in the country. So you find that their voices are they're not reflected in the media, because they're different voices from what the people feel at that specific moment, or they think, or what the media thinks at that specific moment. Although they are kind of, now we shall come to that, but they're kind of like, you can see a bit of things that happen here and there that make you think that maybe the media can actually take a leap and include different voices.
Okay. All right, thank you. Nadine, perspective from DRC, what do you see as the top 3 challenges from in media covering DPI in the DRC?
La RDC, c'est un pays d'abord qui est vraiment confronté à beaucoup de contraintes structurelles qui limitent la profondeur et l'ampleur des couvertures médiatiques. Entre autres, nous avons l'écosystème des infrastructures publiques numériques qui est naissant, et donc il y a moins de projets à couvrir. C'est-à-dire que nous avons à peine une loi sur le numérique qui a été promulguée en 2023. Le plan national Horizon 2025 sur le numérique, le plan national du numérique, qui est à peine mise en application. Nous avons aussi un problème des infrastructures, mais aussi les problèmes de gouvernance qui rend les sujets numériques moins pertinents Donc, plusieurs journalistes sont plus axés sur des questions politiques, les questions de sécurité et les citoyens n'ont pas plus d'intérêt sur les questions liées au numérique. Nous avons aussi le problème des médias, les médias qui manquent des moyens, mais aussi de temps et la formation pour couvrir ces sujets qui sont pertinents. Donc, ça aussi, c'est un grand problème. Nous n'avons pas de journalistes spécialisés en la matière. Vous avez demandé trois, mais tellement il y a des défis, je vais encore ajouter quelques deux éléments. Nous avons aussi une couverture de thématiques qui est plus superficielle et factuelle. Donc, il y a l'annonce du gouvernement sur soit le paiement électronique. Les journalistes ne font que prendre le fait et faire une information et c'est limité juste sur ça. Il y a aussi le problème de source. Les journalistes en RDC ont le problème de sourcing. Donc, comme l'a dit Otieno, les journalistes se focalisent plus sur les officiels. Il y a lancement de telles activités par soit Vodacom, il va juste se focaliser sur le directeur général de Vodacom ou le ministre du TIC qui est en train de donner un lancement d'une activité dans le numérique. Il se focalise seulement sur le ministre, mais sans entrer en contact avec la population ou les experts pour essayer de comprendre c'est quoi le besoin de la communauté. Donc, le problème de sourcing aussi est réel en RDC, dont il faut beaucoup de formation pour que le journaliste se ressource encore, apprenne à comment couvrir ces genres de sujets.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are very, it paints a picture of the situation in the countries, but I'm sure it is not all doom and gloom. There is some positive things that are happening, and I'd like to also request you to also share with us, starting with you, Churchill, what are some of the positive things that we are seeing? Because I mean, it's not all bad, right? Is it? Or is it? But also for all of you who have questions, please prepare your questions so that we can take the questions after this. So I don't know if you can have an indication of the hands who have questions. If not, Churchill, what are some positive elements that you're seeing?
One positive thing that I saw, there wasn't enough of it, but the fact that it was happening in some newsrooms, I thought was very encouraging. The suggestion of a collaboration between newsrooms or stories gotten out of a clear collaboration between a newsroom and a tech entity that is playing out in the tech space. I thought that was something that we can encourage a lot more just to help us, especially given that it is clear that one way of moving the needle is in reframing the DPI story to center it on the human, so that the users of DPIs, the users of DPGs, their voices become a lot more present and visible as we do these stories. I think out of that collaboration, we could get a lot more of that. Collaboration, if we encourage it, I think can also help us deal with the resource question. Because we realize that in some of the newsrooms, lack of capacity is becoming more and more apparent as when you begin to interrogate some of the gaps that were coming out in the research. And we know the reality is that some of those questions might not be answered within the newsroom. They may need players outside the newsroom's ecosystem to help them resolve some of those challenges. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Badru. What did you see as some of the positive elements emerging from South Sudan?
I think from my side, like I said, initially I was actually taken aback, and my assessment was overly worrying, right? Yeah, but then, I mean, like you're talking about a situation where someone tells you, and I'm talking about someone who has headed, let's say, the biggest media development institute and probably heads the biggest radio station. And they're telling you we don't cover, we think these stories are PR, right? So if they're PR, that means you have to pay for them, right? Yeah, and to me, that was kind of like, it was different from the journalism I knew in the sense that you run these stories because you want to bring in as many listeners as possible, or watchers or readers. But then you start thinking, when you start, you kind of like, you step back, and then you also start thinking, okay, they're mostly PR. So then when you assess what that media organization covers, you see that they actually mostly, they go for policy pronouncements, right? They'll cover policy pronouncements. But all these other things, no, that's PR. You either pay for it or you don't cover it. But policy pronouncements.
But specifically, are there any positive development?
Yeah, I was
South Sudan?
actually, that policy pronouncement is related to what is evolving, right? I realize that for them, they cover policy pronouncements, but then there is someone who actually covers a bit of DPI, covers what is coming up. Then there is another radio station that goes it goes for community stories, right? It has a bit of more women. So what seems to also be emerging is like, it's kind of like, it may be looked at from the negative angle, but it's actually, there's a diversity in what the media institutions are covering. I can say that I can look at this newspaper and know exactly where the government is going, right? Because maybe that newspaper has focused on what the government says is happening, right? And then I can go to another radio station and say, this is focused more on the community and the women, right? And then I can know, however little, even if it is 5%, right? With the coverage compared, it will still give me an idea. Like, it can give me an insight into what communities and women are thinking. And then if I go to the one that is mostly policy pronouncements, then I can know what is evolving. So it kind of, I started looking at the diversity as the strength that is actually happening. As long as you can be able to read it very well and split these insights.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so there's value in that diversity. Nadine, DRC, you spoke of so many challenges. Is there anything positive that you've seen that, we can celebrate as fellow East Africans?
Ok, c'est vrai, il y a beaucoup de défis, mais aussi il y a un point positif qui est la vitalité sur l'innovation. Donc, nous avons vu que beaucoup de journalistes couvrent les sujets sur l'innovation, surtout dans les secteurs de l'identité numérique et le paiement électronique. Bien qu'il manque certains tacts de journalistes d'investigation et le problème des sourcing, mais aussi la concentration sur les genres masculins et les officiels. Mais la couverture de ces thématiques il y a 2 ans n'était pas existante en RDC, mais au fur des années, nous voyons la montée. En 2023, il y avait moins de couverture sur les thématiques axées sur les infrastructures publiques numériques. En 2024, la pente a monté. Et en 2025, il y a plus d'engouement sur cette couverture.
Oh, fantastic. All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the panelists or also Tomesege from the presentation? Maybe if I can see some hands, I can see one lady there. Could you please, 1, 2? So just your name and then your question.
Okay.
And then you can say who you're directing.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Ivan Lukanda from Makerere, Uganda. I'll ask my question to Dr. Mwesige. This research which you led was collaborative, 9 countries, And my question is, how can we use journalistic collaboration to improve coverage of DPIs? And to the panelists, from your, maybe I should ask this to Churchill, from your submissions, it appears that DPIs are covered in isolation, that someone doesn't look at having a national ID as something that can give you access, for instance, to financial services, to voting, to preventing crime. How can journalists package the story of DPIs better to ensure that the ordinary people can associate with DPIs? And to my sister from DR Congo, and maybe Mr. Mulumba can answer this as well. From your submissions, it appears that there's evidence that the opaqueness, the secrecy with which governments run, especially in this region, in hiding information, information regarding contracts, regarding data, and looking at this information as part of national security seems to interfere with the way DPIs are covered. What do you think about opaqueness and its effect on how DPIs are covered? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was another hand.
I'm John from Media Focus on Africa. Just before I ask Dr. Mwesige, I would just like to maybe tell or speak to Badru's reference to PR stories. I think it's a capacity question, because if the media houses get all manner of all manner of PR stories, they should be able to have the capacity to look beyond the PR and identify the critical issues that they can pursue in actually their storytelling, and not just have a capping in their mind when they see a story and they brand it as a PR story. So I guess we would need to speak to the editor and the journalists about that. Throughout the presentation, I kept asking this question, and it's an open one. Who are the journalists writing for? Are they just being accountable to the people who are inviting them to press conferences, or there is a clear agenda on where they're coming from and where they're going? And I wonder whether in your research you found a pattern in how the audiences perceive these stories, and whether you looked into the reach of these media outlets. I mean, they could be speaking to each other, but maybe not speaking to the audiences out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question? Okay.
Thank you. My name is John Semakola. I'm from Uganda Christian University. My questions are two. One, I would like briefly to know how the journalists participating in the training here were selected in terms of gender, because that can actually help address what the gaps which we are talking about here, particularly in terms of gender and seniority. And two, is there a possibility that we can have the curriculum being used to train these journalists here to end up become or join the curriculum being used in academic institutions, especially in universities? The issue is that many times we focus on training senior journalists, like probably many of us here, but in 1 or 2 years to come, you realize that many of them have moved on. So you lack the journalists with experience who can actually carry on with the task they were trained for. So do we have a plan, for example, to make sure that young upcoming journalists are also prepared for this task? Thank you.
All right. Okay, just keep it briefly, one, last one, so that we can take the round and then conclude the panel.
Thank you to the presentations. My name is David Indeje. So, just slightly, I remember listening to Daktari and the panel. Then I think maybe the question will be when Peter was saying news, it was more of news events. That speaks to one thing. It speaks to the question within the newsroom, like what can inform them from an editorial point of view to define certain subjects, not as news events. Because, for example, I can say like in 2024, much of what was happening within that space was around social health within Kenya. And that is part of the DPI infrastructure and money. But from a reporting perspective, how can journalists, now this may be to president and to the rest, like within newsrooms, how can journalists be informed or be made aware that there is more to what they're just reporting as a news event? And like when you talk about enterprise is about people who are already doing something within that particular ecosystem, but it's more of speaking to them rather than to the larger public good and how it impacts. But when it comes to news events and political figures being the story rather than the beneficiaries of the product, then it means we end up not having the depth that is required, but associated to a one-time, like a hard news one-time event, rather than giving it optics and the implications to it. That's how you can phrase it here.
Thank you. We had one question on this table.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelist. And I have a comment and a question just based from listening to the discussions. I think on choice of DPI stories, I think if you look at the media ecosystem in our region, it's more of priorities. It's not that of DPI stories. There's so many DPI stories that can be told. But if you look inwardly within media houses, what holds credence within a particular context or during a particular timeline? So I think that also informs why we don't see so many DPI stories, because priorities are linked to certain thematics. And that brings me to my question to all the panelists. What are some of the incentives that can be designed to ensure that journalists pick up these stories? And this has to be linked back to the editorial teams. How can they come up with incentives through different partnerships to ensure that this story is grown? Because what is not being told, that is where the story is. And we see that the more stories around DPIs are done, the more we'll get to know some of the things that may be hidden and also can inform public discourse around DPI and DPG issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Last one was on this. Sorry.
Good morning.
Oh.
I first would wish to thank the presenters.
Through the chair, but anyway, I'd allow you. Okay, proceed quickly, yes.
Okay. I just want to thank the presenters for the clear presentations. And my question revolves around the stories coming out. One, DPI sounds very technical. And then that would mean it could discourage a lot of people from writing about it, despite the training. So my question then would be, is it possible, how can it be simplified to attract more journalists to write stories on that? And then I realize also there are a lot of stories looking at what it deals with. You have talked of climate change, societal challenges such as affordable health, financial inclusion, quality education, and access to justice. There's a digital element to all these things that we are talking about. Then that, which would then mean there are a lot of stories that would come out of this. How can it be simplified to just have more journalists write about that, and then also to give solutions to the societal problems that we have? Thank you.
All right. Last question. Yeah.
Very quickly. Among the topics that were raised on DPI, one of them was, my name is Caleb Gichuhi, I work at Build Up. And among the topics that were raised on DPI, one of them was national security, and significantly showed that DRC and South Sudan are the ones who are actually talking about that, and Kenya was at 0. And I'm just curious because if you look at that, if you think about the context, DRC and South Sudan have been plagued with conflicts. So I was wondering, is it because of that, or why national security, and what exactly was that about? Just curious.
That one is directed to
Nadine and Badru.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Dr. Mwisi, would you like to start with the questions directed to you? Please let him have the mic. Or you'll go there. Okay, cool.
We want to come here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see. The first question, I think, was from Ivan on collaboration. Good question. In fact, yesterday, we spent nearly 2 hours with our fellows talking about cross-border reporting collaborations, because we need to recognize the promise of those, especially in the context of the resource constraints. We are suffering in very many newsrooms, but also in some cases, the information flow challenges, So if you can't get access to information in the Tanzanian side of the border, Ugandan counterpart can actually help you get access to this information about who is coming in, for instance, to your country from the other side, and so on. So there's a lot of promise there, and we're encouraging this now. However, I remember the frustration of one of the fellows, I think from Burundi, who has been quite consistent in asking for collaboration. Says they go to meeting after meeting and, agree after journalism training that they are going to collaborate as regional journalists. He tries to follow up and nobody, seems to be bothered by this. In other words, journalists seem to be paying lip service. I think there is a lot of, short-term thinking amongst very many journalists. People want to do quick things. I mean, one of the reasons, and we have had this in the reports from Kenya and Tanzania, from the informant interviews, one of the things that keeps us from doing big things sometimes is because they are time-consuming and they don't bring money immediately. So the journalist who wants to do 5 stories a week thinks that thinking about collaboration is just going to, slow him down. So the big picture is lost because of that short-term thinking. He just wants to churn out these stories, attend the Raila thing. Raila is coming back to, the body is being brought back, attend that one, the segment is being launched, attend that one, and so on. So there is a lot of problems because of that short-term thinking. We have to reorient. And we have to have these conversations within newsrooms, within academic institutions, and so on. Then Jan talked about who journalists are writing for. We did not have the time and focus on audiences in this research, but I think it is a conversation that actually newsrooms need to have. Who are we writing for? And how are the people we're writing for receiving what they are? I mean, I'm imagining that despite all the resource challenges we are hearing about in the media sector, that people still have time for some research on how their audience is actually receiving their content. Because what's the point of continuing with content that nobody is reading, for instance? So that's something that I think is more should be addressed to the newsrooms themselves. They need to have reflection on who they are writing for and whether what they are producing resonates with those audiences How were the journalists we had, I think that was John, selected? We had a fairly competitive process. We put out an open call and received 214 what we would call complete applications, 214 of them, and we needed only 20. So we evaluated them against a criteria that included, experience, interest in digital transformation issues, writing history and samples and all that, but above all, story ideas. The promise of their story ideas. Each person proposed story ideas. Now, precisely because we are aware of the gender constraints in the region, when it comes to newsroom, distribution via gender, we awarded points. Like it was like affirmative action. I don't know if the ladies who are in the fellowship know this, but we awarded some points to ladies because without it, there was a risk that we would end up with 20 men. So we said, these women, will get some points as a result of, but it wasn't just women actually, it was also some other, I think some other areas of disadvantaged groups, which I don't have to go into. But yeah, so sir, we actually did address gender from the very beginning when it came to selecting our fellows. And then very quickly, the curriculum, we are happy to share with you what we are coming up with. We kind of use the commons, kind of rules. So we are happy to share with you anything on our website, anything that we share in public meetings, you are happy to actually adopt it and run with it. But we would also encourage you to think about, if it could also be another way for universities to make money. Short courses for professionals, short courses on sort of include this digital literacy into your, training, and that's the other thing, finally, because so many questions. Finally, there was the question from my sister somewhere on how we can simplify this stuff, which sounds very technical. We had a government official from the Ministry of ICT and Digital Economy here in Kenya the other day, today is Thursday, on Tuesday. And one of the things he talked about, which I think, we should all embrace in government, in civil society, was they need to do more in terms of public communication about what they are doing and what it adds up to. He was saying, for instance, the government has these ambitions that they are going to come up with hubs and all that, but who the hell knows what a hub is? I was joking with my fellows here that what is a hub in your local language? Digital hub, I don't know, U-hub or something like that. So we need to actually translate these things into why does this matter? Civil society should communicate the same way. Why is this a big deal? DPI, why is it a big deal? Why should we be paying attention to it? So that the conversation becomes relevant for everybody else. I think I should stop there. Sir, thank you.
Thank you. Badru, you had some questions to you. Maybe you can respond to them 2 minutes each.
One, I'll start with the last question, which is the national security frame. Why is it that there's a lot of interest in national security? And this is because, remember, most of the stories are coming from the government. So the stories are issued in the frame that, you have to be careful with digital media, right? It can be a risk too. They are framed from the risk angle. Right? DPI, DPG can be a risk to national security. The other question was about incentives for journalists. What are the incentives for journalists to pick up on DPI and DPG? And frankly, absent money, because money is a big problem for the media in South Sudan. You're talking about a radio station paying $10 per month, right, to a reporter. So you're looking, and then you're talking about running diesel generators for community radios. Everything boils down to money, which also answers a journalist's question in the sense that, okay, the PR question, right? people understand. I think there have been a lot. In fact, for me, frankly, there's been a lot more training. There's been too much. There's training saturation, according to me. And I've been one of those people going around training people. And I feel like it reached its end. So people know exactly what they are supposed to do. But there is that challenge, and it goes to the challenge of the economics. How do you run a newsroom without money? So they have made a conscious decision that, you know what? DPI for us is what? Is PR. Business news is PR, right? Unless it's coming from government, right? Then we're going to run it for free. But if it's an institution that is going to, even if there is the slightest benefit, then you have to pay for it. Then we also have the issue of secrecy, the first question, which was, secrecy is not a problem. I think secrecy is not the challenge that we're facing, that the media is facing the other side. The challenge is, as we said, mostly the literacy, and as someone said, DPI sounds technical, right? And it is technical, so we shouldn't just say it sounds. It is technical, and it takes a while for people to relate. People can relate, we saw spikes. People can relate to digital ID. You know, there's going to be a digital ID. You know, there's going to be biometrics. They relate to those things. And then we saw that when that pronouncement is made, we see a spike for that month in reporting, because maybe the media is picking it up as something interesting. And that means maybe the public is also picking it up as something that is interesting. So over to you, moderator.
Nadine, you can add to the questions very briefly.
Ok, j'ai eu deux questions. La première question de mon frère au fond, il a parlé du manque de transparence de la part du gouvernement qui essaie de cacher les données. Quand vous cherchez à trouver les données, vous ne les trouverez jamais parce qu'il y a tellement de magouilles au sein du gouvernement. Ce qu'il faudra faire, il y a certaines données qui sont mises en ligne par certaines organisations ou des sociétés de recherche qu'ils publient en ligne. Au moins, ces données, nous savons qu'ils sont transparents et corrects. Il y a l'exemple des JSMA qui publient des données en ligne. À part ça, il faut plus se focaliser sur la population et les experts. Bon, nous n'écrivons pas seulement pour les gouvernements, nous écrivons pour la communauté, les citoyens qui doivent demander rapport au gouvernement. Donc, il faut plus se focaliser sur ces données en ligne, mais aussi sur les experts, descendre dans la population, comprendre ce qui se passe, ce qui ne marche pas et essayer de communiquer. Et avec ces informations, je crois que ça va mettre pression sur le gouvernement. L'autre question qui m'a été adressée, c'est les questions, je sais pas, saisi les noms. La question de sécurité nationale qui revient et pourquoi ça revient en RDC. Je dirais que nous savons tous le contexte, c'est que la RDC est en train de traverser le contexte de conflit qui date depuis plus de 30 ans et cela capte plus l'attention des citoyens et des journalistes et les médias. Alors, un pays en guerre n'est pas à mesure de se focaliser plus sur les sujets de bonne gouvernance et les sujets innovants. On est plus focalisé sur les sujets factuels de la guerre. Et je crois que c'est ce qui attire plus les citoyens et les journalistes et fait assez que les sujets sur les infrastructures publiques numériques ne soient pas trop couvertes en RDC, même si c'est couvert par certains médias. Les citoyens ne portent pas assez d'intérêt sur ces sujets. Alors, à quoi bon couvrir un sujet qui n'est pas intéressant pour son audience? On risquerait de perdre l'audience. Alors, les médias se focalisent plus sur les questions de la sécurité nationale.
Thank you very much, Chashil. Had a lot of questions.
Thank you.
Yes.
think there are a number of questions I could respond to. One or two specifically directed to me. There's a question about how might we package these stories better. There's a question about incentives. I think there's one about how do we make the language more accessible. And one, I think, from David that I think speaks to mentorship. In today, and I think in this research, we are talking about DPIs. But the minute you remove that veneer, you find that we're actually talking about digital systems that touch people, be it about health, be it about tax, be it about surveillance, sometimes even it could be about education. So I think a lot of ground can be covered if we find ways to reframe the DPI story by making the user central in whatever stories that we are doing. Just challenging ourselves, this system that we are reporting on, who is going to use it, to what end, and how does it then affect them in terms of their own interest in whatever it is that, whatever problem they're trying to solve. That will ordinarily lead us to find very ordinary voices of these users and to make those voices central in a story. Even if the story initially was about policy, ultimately, that policy impacts a certain user, a certain citizen somewhere. I think we have to be a lot more intentional, a lot more deliberate in how we draw in those voices into the story. Secondly, I think is a challenge to the media leadership, newsroom leadership. How are we briefing and debriefing our journalists as we assign them to go out and get these stories? A good brief usually will challenge the reporter to be a lot more broader and a lot more comprehensive in how they do their stories. A good debrief usually would hold that reporter accountable to the plan, to the original plan that had been discussed with them. Doing that consistently helps in mentoring that reporter to be a much better person going forward. Third, and I think it's starting here, we have a cohort of fellows from 9 countries, all of whom have a certain level of expertise on these issues. In many instances, you find that what's happening in Kenya in some shape or form is also happening in the other countries. I think we can be a lot more deliberate in enabling collaboration, starting with ourselves, so that on an ongoing basis, we could be working on joint projects across our national boundaries. And that same collaboration perhaps could give us some incentives, because the more I collaborate with a journalist from a different jurisdiction, the more I learn, not just in the skill and art of doing a story, but also in terms of expanding my understanding of the subject of the topic as it impacts different nations. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's give all the panelists a hand. Let us also give a hand to Dr. Mwesige. And another one to all of us for being active. You have heard them, and I couldn't have a better conclusion than what you offered, all of you. We have to be intentional about the collaborations and partnerships. We have to mentor, we have to work together across the countries, and also be more intentional about the kind of stories, give the stories that people need to hear, but also the ones that they don't know that they need to know, so that then we're able to advance this work around DPI. So with those many remarks, I know we are running behind schedule. We have tea that is served outside. So are we able to pick our teas and come back in so that we can do the next panel? Or we can take a 10-minute health break and then start maybe at the top of them. Is that practical? 10 minutes? Stretch your muscles, get some sugar, then come back. Oh, let's keep time. Bon appetit. Tea is served outside. Let's be back in time. You can come back in with your teas.
Nakaambiwa no, tunataka